Welcome, beautiful people, to Camp Koji. My name is Joel. Thank you for joining me as I break down the biggest gaming news from the week that was on the only podcast you will ever need. Now, in today's show, we're going to talk about PlayStation confirming their Bungie takeover, WB Games' shaky future, and hardware decline across the industry. But first, I want to talk a bit about Splitgate 2. So last week, we got our first look at gameplay for this upcoming title. We had a teaser, was like a few weeks ago, or something like that. But the team decided to put out a bunch of gameplay for it, like a 5-6 minute video, something like that, with a bunch of professional players or like streamers. I don't know if any of these players have ever played for esports teams. Some of the names seem familiar to me, like this. I think there's a guy here called Timmy, who I believe plays a lot of Apex Legends, pretty good. So I just want to give my quick thoughts on what they showed. I don't know, just kind of weird. It's one of those things where I think you can clearly tell that it sort of feels like the Portals are taking a back seat. Like if I showed you this game and I never told you the name of it, I don't think you'd be able to guess it was Splitgate anything. And it just seems like they're really going in a completely different direction. And this to me feels like a game that's being built very backwards compared to the original Splitgate. The original Splitgate, I think, started from a very pure place. You know, a very core idea of taking a popular old school type of formula like Halo and then adding a very unique twist to it, which were the portals. And, you know, let's be honest, we're at this moment in time right now where if you're wanting to put a shooter out into the market, you need that. You need a thing. You need a hook. You need something that's going to instantly grab people. Splitgate, it was, you know, portals. Recently we saw Frack Punk, you know, the whole card breaking design that, you know, changes the battlefield. And obviously the fact that it's sort of a tactical shooter differentiates it a little bit. Very recently we saw Spectre Divide with this really cool hook of like, oh yeah, you could actually control two people at once, 3v3. It's such a really neat, cool hook. Just something that you can very easily explain to people, a very easy mechanic on paper. But then if you have a history of playing shooters, you can look at what's been introduced to you and instantly your mind starts racing of possibilities and strategies. And I think that's like, you know, Spectre Divide did something really good with that. And Splitgate also did something very, very similar. When I first heard about it, I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. A lot of people were easily trying to sell it by calling it Halo with portals. I downloaded it. It definitely 1,000% felt like Halo. And yeah, the portals really added an interesting dynamic, and it introduced something that I feel like you've never really experienced in a game before, especially the fact that you had these individual controls for opening and closing portals. And then when you watched the skill gap in Splitgate from, you know, people who, you know, only played it for like a few days compared to people that have been playing it for, you know, since launch, the skill gap is incredibly wide when you see the way that these professionals use these portals. It, to me, it made for a perfect execution of an idea. And I think that when we think about entertainment mediums, even films, TV shows, but obviously video games, there sort of becomes this moment in this notion with a lot of these companies where money becomes like the only thing that matters. And the thing about it is that, look, these companies need to pay their employees, right? Nobody's going to invest into a project unless they can see some sort of profit. But I feel like when I look at Splitgate 2, to me, it looks like a game that is being driven by profits, being driven by what is already successful out there on the market. The art style, the character design, the fact that, once again, the portal seems to be taking a back seat. I don't really sort of understand the direction that they're heading in, because when I look at this game now, it just feels sort of like everything else. You have like, these different, they call them factions. They're trying to tell people, oh no, it's not a hero shooter. Yeah, but each faction has their own individual abilities. Let's be honest, it's a hero shooter by a different name. There's a faction, I think it's the Arrows one, that's supposed to be like very fast and agile. But then when I think about all these different abilities that they're introducing, I'm not sure if they're pickup based or if there's something that are locked into each faction depending on which one you pick. But, this whole thing like a time bubble where enemies slow down when they step into it. You actually speed up. You can reload and shoot. It increases your rate of fire when you're inside the bubble. These shields that you can put up. To me, now this game just looks like everything else. And, even like the stim pack, the stabbing of the needle. I'm like, yeah, I just feel it just feels like something you've seen way too many times before. And I don't know, like for me, I just don't understand this direction that they're heading. I think that when you look at the market and the market saturation when it comes to shooters, you either you need a hook, or I think right now what I think gamers are looking for is something just a little bit simpler, a little bit just more pick up and play, drop me into a match. I think there are a lot of people that are just really sick of the almost like over commercialization and consolidation of shooters right now, where it really feels like designs are being led by profit. Like that's really what's leading to the decisions that are being made, where a decision is being brought up and someone's saying, yeah, I don't think decision A is going to make us as much money as decision B. And yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely interested in trying it. This is free to play. I think they say in the trailer that August 14th, they're going to show a little bit more. So I am a little bit intrigued with it, but at the same time, I just don't, I don't see success right now for this game, especially the fact that it's like you had Splitgate 1, and instead of kind of building upon that, you essentially abandon it completely. And now you're introducing something that I feel, kind of doesn't really sort of stand on its own. I do like the speed of it. I think there's a part of me that has been, in a sense, yearning a bit more for an arena type shooter, something very, very fast paced. And this definitely looks like a faster pace than some of the other games that are on the market. But I don't like these tactics of tools and abilities being the differentiating factor between winning or losing a matchup. That's what I liked about Splitgate. It just felt like pure skill. It was purely about your map knowledge, your positioning. And now it's like, you have poor positioning. Oh, it's okay. You have a shield. You can sort of, save yourself. Or, you can just kind of drop down a time bubble or whatever the heck. I don't know exactly what they're calling it inside the game. So something to keep an eye out for. But once again, a series of decisions that I'm sort of not really understanding why they made them. Our next story, I wanted to talk a bit about Bungie. So we talked about this last week, this announcement that Bungie was cutting, I believe, about 220 employees among a bunch of other changes that they were introducing to the company. And last week, Sony President, COO, and CFO Hiroki Totoki confirmed Bungie's restructuring plan. So these were basically sort of, I guess you could say, rumors that came from reputable sources. A few journalists that were talking about some of the changes that were happening internally at Bungie as a result of these cuts. And last week, we actually got confirmation from Sony that this is, in fact, actually what's happening. So Hiroki Totoki says that the purpose of the restructure is cost restructure and portfolio optimization. He confirmed Bungie's back office functions, quote, should be integrated with the studio of SIE. They will concentrate Bungie's headcount and resources on Destiny 2 and Marathon, and other title development will move to PlayStation Studios. So a lot of changes on there coming through to Bungie. So, what we had heard when this news first broke was like a little over a week ago, was that this was the beginning of Sony starting to take over Bungie. And, there are a lot of other things that are being heard through the grapevine, such as that Bungie was not being totally transparent and honest with PlayStation about their financial status. That hasn't been confirmed yet. But what has been confirmed is essentially that, Bungie is, for all intents and purposes, now almost 100% gone, meaning that the company is no longer under independent control. That was something that was a big sticking point when Bungie sold itself to PlayStation or to Sony. They said that they would be able to operate independent from Sony, but at the same time be able to have access to the resources and the power that Sony would be able to grant them. And it looks like as part of that deal, as part of that contract that was struck with PlayStation, they would have to hit certain milestones, and they did not hit those milestones. And so that means that now they are no longer able to make independent decisions. So what that could possibly mean right now is, they do have an upcoming game called Marathon. I mean, it could be that PlayStation says, yeah, guess what? The Xbox version is not going to happen now. We're going to actually cut that. Or the Xbox version is actually going to be 6 months later. Do I see that happening? Probably not. I think PlayStation would. I could see PlayStation sticking to that, especially because, when you're talking about something free to play, a shooter, you want to get as big of a base as possible. They're probably going to aim to try to do cross play at launch. So it just really wouldn't make any sense for PlayStation to sort of take that away at this point. All I'm saying is that now they have the control to do that, or it would seem that now they have the control to do that. And then, of course, they had this other title that they were incubating within Bungie that has now been taken out of Bungie and is now under development at PlayStation Studios, or PlayStation Studios is the publisher for it. I don't know exactly what's happening there. Apparently, a separate studio has been established. We don't know the details. We don't know the name of it, and they're working on some sort of game that began at Bungie. So essentially, Bungie right now is continuing work on Destiny 2. They put out a message. I don't have it verbatim in front of me, where they were trying to alleviate the concerns of fans by letting them know, like, look, we know all this stuff is happening. This doesn't mean that we're abandoning Destiny 2. And then, of course, they're continuing work on Marathon. Now, on a recent episode of Skill Up's Friends Per Second podcast, Jason Schreier was asked about how Marathon's development was going, and this is what he had to say. Not great from what I've heard. There's a reason that it was planned for this year and slipped a whole year, and people that I've talked to are a little pessimistic about it even hitting its current planned deadline. But we'll see. I don't know exactly when that is. Sometime in 2025, I'm not sure. Yeah, the sentiment I've heard is not great around it, at least from a few months ago. I'm worried about Marathon being in a similar situation as Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, where it's been in development for a while. It entered development when extraction shooters were super hot. I don't know if that's the case anymore. And now, because they've committed so much money, and because it was the project that was the furthest along as opposed to all their other incubation bets, they're really putting a lot into it. And I'm just not sure there's much of a chance that it'll be successful. Now, this is interesting to hear, but I sort of partially disagree with Jason's assessment. And he was very clear when he talked about this on the podcast that this isn't him making a prediction about what's happening with Marathon. He admitted that he thought that Helldivers 2 was going to be a massive failure, and he was obviously wrong about that. He admitted it. So he sort of posited it in a way of saying, yeah, this is not me saying this is going to fail. This is me just relaying what I've heard, that there seemed to be a bit of rumblings over at Bungie and a bit of concern over a game like Marathon. But I actually disagree. I think Marathon has a really, really good chance of finding success. And I look at it almost in a similar vein as what Power World was able to do. So one of the reasons why Power World was successful wasn't just, obviously they had this very, frontline, easy hook easy visual hook. Pokemon with guns, as everyone liked to explain it. But what it took the survival genre and it tried to simplify it a bit and widen that audience. And what they were able to do was they were able to satisfy that core audience that really loved everything that survivor shooters were all about, and then simultaneously try their best to widen the net to casual players that probably have never tried or thought about trying a survival shooter before, or a survival game. And I think Bungie can do something similar with Marathon. You know, we've seen extraction shooters even way back to something like The Division. You know, obviously Escape from Tarkov is a huge one, and all these other ones that are on the market. But I feel like there hasn't really been an extraction shooter to really cross over. You know, especially something like Tarkov is probably the game that comes front of mind to everyone when they think about extraction shooters. And that is, you know, let's be honest, it's still a very, very core type of game. If there's a company that would put money on that could widen that net and create something that could satisfy the core audience that's already used to and they know what to expect from an extraction shooter, and then simultaneously try to bring in a much more casual audience to try something that they've never tried before, I would put my money on Bungie to be the company to do it. And, you know, that initial trailer, I think, is a good indicator of the direction that they're trying to head. I called it the best trailer that came out last year. It just looks absolutely phenomenal. You know, I just loved the look of that trailer. And when you look at the art style of it, it just grabs you very, very quickly. And so I wouldn't look at it as a similar situation to Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad failed. I don't think it failed just because it's like, oh, you know, you guys entered into like a crowded genre. It was a series of bad decisions that led to Suicide Squad's failures. So sometimes it was small things, like the fact that, you know, you give me a character like King Shark, but then you force me to use guns. Like you know, if you gave King Shark and someone like Captain Boomerang their own really unique move set, using, I don't know, boomerangs. And for King Shark, if I could go around and actually eat people and rip people apart, you know, those decisions instantly would have made the game way more appealing instead of this extremely repetitive mission structure that they decided to go with, and they tried to hide behind a really nice, high-quality cutscene, stories, characters, and writing. So I just can't see how Marathon would be in a similar situation. I don't think that extraction shooters, like, that's it, you're too late, you missed your moment. I don't think so. I don't think there's really there has yet to still be an extraction shooter that I feel like has really taken over multiplayer. Like I actually feel like survival is actually more saturated right now than extraction shooters are. So obviously, we'll have to wait and see, but I think that there is a good chance for success here from Bungie when it comes to what they could possibly do with Marathon. So yeah, I think overall, it's a little sad to see Bungie lose its independence. I feel like that's not what obviously they set out to become. But I've said this before, it's not like they're, you know, in the hands of Embracer Group or something like that, right? You're still under the PlayStation umbrella. I think you're still in very, very good hands. It just kind of goes to show you, you know, I had just talked about this in the last segment with Splitgate. What happens when you allow blind profit to steer the ship? You know, when you think about PlayStation and their live service pivot, it really hasn't been a success. You know, Helldivers 2 obviously did very good. Its latest update is getting trashed by their fans. Apparently they had nerfed things, including, I believe I was reading, like the flamethrower was nerfed and a lot of people were pissed off. They went and did almost like another review bombing over at Steam. Personally, I don't understand why would you nerf things in a PvE game. I don't get it. If someone wants to explain that to me, I don't understand that. Balancing in a multiplayer competitive game makes sense. In a cooperative shooter, it doesn't make sense. Let people feel powerful. Let people have fun. I just don't get why. Maybe you just have to increase those orders. Maybe make it instead of 1 million enemies, 2 million enemies, whatever it is. But if it's a cooperative shooter, I should feel powerful at all times. I don't understand why they're nerfing things, and it seems like their fans are really beginning to become fed up with it. They've lost over 90% of their user base. Concord comes out. I can't believe Concord comes out in just I don't even remember the date. I'm gonna have to look it up. Is it like a week from now that this thing comes out? August 23rd actually comes out 3 days after Wukong, which I think is going to definitely be a Game of the Year contender. I'm excited, looking forward to it. This game is without a doubt going to flop the absolute moment it drops. I think Marvel Rivals Beta had like 50,000 people on it or something like that. And that's not counting PlayStation and Xbox that were also in that closed beta. If you guys remember, Concord had like 2,000 people in it. The Last of Us Factions thing was canceled. Jason Schreier, in that same interview where he talked about Marathon, he confirmed that they sunk a lot of money into it. There were hundreds of people working on that game. Apparently, heads did roll. That's his direct quote at PlayStation when that game was canceled, because it was a big deal. They sunk a lot of money into it. Personally, I don't understand why they canceled it. I think it's something that they should have transitioned it into another studio, find someone else to pick it up. I would understand why you wouldn't want Naughty Dog tied to a live service game. I think that makes sense. But your PlayStation, there's some team you could have found, even if you had to just publish it, similar to what you did to Helldivers, and have someone else take it over, and then have Naughty Dog just sort of direct it, lead it moving forward. I understand why you wouldn't want Naughty Dog tied to a live service game, but I still don't understand. That's a money printer right there. Last of Us has never been as popular as it is right now. Season 2 is coming up of the HBO show. It won a bunch of awards. The first sort of look at it that we got was like a week, 2 weeks ago. It looks pretty good. So yeah, I don't understand why they would cancel something like that. There were, through the leak, we heard about the Spider-Man live service. We've heard about Twisted Metal being a live service that was canceled. Horizon, who knows exactly what happened to that. But now you see that they picked up Bungie with this purpose, right? Their purpose was like, these guys are going to help us with our live service. And now the company has lost over 400, I think it is, or at least over 350 employees since they were first acquired. And who knows how much of that talent has walked. We know that a lot of the money that Sony paid for PlayStation paid for Bungie, a lot of it was just guarantee wages. There was basically guaranteed bonuses to go to Bungie to tell them, hey, if we're buying this company, we need these key personnel, this key talent to stay on for at least a year or 2 years. And this is what we're going to pay them for that to happen, because, Bungie is just a logo if all the people are gone. And it's a little bit hard to get a grasp on how many people are left. We know that 2 key leaders had left. They weren't fired. They had just left. I'm sorry, I don't have the notes in front of me. I don't remember their names. So we're kind of at this point right now with Bungie where it's like, what is left? What's left of Bungie? How much of it is left in there? So there are concerns, but at the same time, the reason why I'm not saying let's ring the alarm, the ship is about to sink, sort of thing, is because it's PlayStation. I would never count PlayStation out, even though they're obviously struggling when it comes to their live service execution. I believe once again, I think they put profits over what has made them successful as a company. But I still wouldn't bet against PlayStation, right? They've been, at the top of their game for quite some time now for a reason. Our next story deals with Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers announced a 41% year-over-year drop in Q2 gaming revenue, mostly due to poor Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League sales compared to last year's Hogwarts Legacy. I mean, no surprise. There's literally nothing Warner Brothers probably could put a Batman versus Superman game out. Probably would not have beaten what Hogwarts Legacy was able to do last year. If Suicide Squad was a good game, it probably would not have been as low as 41%. Now, according to Financial Times sources, WB is looking to offload smaller assets in an attempt to help reverse a near 70% decline in its stock price since Warner Media and Discovery merged in 2022. So I have a list here of the studios that Warner Brothers currently owns. So they own Avalanche Software. They're best known, obviously, for Hogwarts Legacy. You keep that team forever. Nothing should move there. That team should immediately be working on a sequel, and I would be absolutely blown away if that's not what they're working on right now. Then they have TT Games, which creates all the Lego games. That's a keeper. Rocksteady, you have Arkham Trilogy and Suicide Squad. I'm going to get back to them. NetherRealm and Mortal Kombat. Let's be honest, Mortal Kombat, unfortunately, is not as successful as it was when it first launched, which is kind of weird. When Mortal Kombat 1 was first announced and the first launch, it looked like everything was amazing for it. But, you know, I don't play fighting games, so I just kind of follow it as a spectator. I love to watch it, you know, EVOs and CEOs and all that stuff. And it seems like a lot of fans it just doesn't seem like they're really happy with Mortal Kombat 1. It looks like they're struggling with signups and getting people to come out for these tournaments and competitions. For me, it's pretty obvious that their next game is going to be an Injustice game. I think that's really just the way to go at this point. But yeah, that's once again, that's a keeper, obviously. Monolith Productions, they worked on the Middle-earth games, and they're currently working on Wonder Woman. Portkey Games, they worked on Hogwarts Legacy alongside Avalanche, and their next game is Harry Potter Quidditch Champions, which comes out soon. WB Games Boston, their last game was 2017's Game of Thrones Conquest. WB Games Montreal, they created Gotham Knights. We don't know what they're working on now. And then their latest acquisition, which was First Player Games, they're making Multiverses. On top of that, they also confirmed they're considering licensing their IP out to other studios, and they do have some other satellites here and there. I don't think that the move for WB is selling studios. I don't think that's really the move right now. I think they have a lot of great talent. When you look at all the teams that they have, these are some pretty good teams, you know, especially what Avalanche was able to do with Hogwarts Legacy. I'm still blown away by what they were able to do with that game. Just a phenomenal job. I think their issue right now is they shouldn't be defined by Suicide Squad. And I think that, you know, they've said before in the past that they want more live service games. And it's obviously that's a mistake. You know, you can't create a successful gaming portfolio as a publisher and it skew so heavy towards live service. It's just not going to work. People are always going to want something a little bit more traditional mixed in. No one wants nothing but live service games. And the issue with live service right now, with the way that it's working and with the way that companies like WB want it to work, is that they look at everything else that's successful, especially the mobile stuff like the Genshin Impacts of the world, right? And they say they're making a lot of money. I want that. Just make that happen. And they usually go in without any proper planning. And that's really what leads us to something like Suicide Squad. You know, one of the biggest mistakes of Suicide Squad was taking a traditionally single-player studio and then forcing them, in a sense, to make this game a live service. Think about how phenomenal Suicide Squad would have been if it was just a really fun 4-player story-based game, you know, but it had multiplayer in it so you could play with your friends. And it wasn't a game created for you to play forever. And I think that gamers have reached this point where, and publishers need to understand is, you can't have more than one forever game. That's just not how this works. You can't have more than one forever game. There's just not enough time in a day to do something like that. This is why, as more live service games hit the market, the more we saturate that market, the more difficult it is because there are no new players left. You are putting yourself into a position where you are telling your marketing team, I don't just need new players, I need you to find me a way to take players from all these other games away and have them play my game instead. That's not an easy thing to do, especially because, how do you pull someone away from a Fortnite that they've been playing and building and collecting skins and cosmetics for 5 years? I'll use myself as an example. How do you pull me away from Overwatch, a person has been collecting cosmetics for over 5 years and has been playing this game at least once a week since it came out? It's a very difficult proposition to make. You might temporarily take me away, like, playing Marvel Rivals beta. When Marvel Rivals comes out, yeah, I'll probably play a little bit, but to completely pull me away from Overwatch and make Marvel Rivals my daily and my Overwatch like my once in a blue, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's a lot easier to do that with a single player game because a single player game has an end. There's an ending. And once it ends, it's like, it's like you're on Netflix. You just finished watching a movie, and the next thing is, well, what's the next movie? And then you move on to something different. With live service games, that's not the expectation. Like, imagine a TV show that never ever ended, where there's like a new episode every single day. Like, no, I hope I speak for everyone. I don't think anyone wants that. Everyone talks about how, like, in the future it's going to be AI. You could tell it what you want to watch. It's not going to work. That's not what human beings at their core want. Like, no one wants something like that. So the issue with WB is that they're chasing after that dragon, but they're just not understanding that there has to be a balance. You can't have one without the other. And of course, a lot of people are looking at WB and saying, like, you just found success. You found it. It's Hogwarts Legacy. And when you think about Hogwarts Legacy, not only is it successful because it leveraged an extremely, extremely popular intellectual property, but it was very, very successful because it stayed true to that intellectual property. If you are a Harry Potter fan, this was the dream, right? If you read the books and or watched the film, this was the first game where it truly felt like you were interacting and living inside that intellectual property as it was built, inside that castle, inside those different schools and stuff like that, Slytherins and all that stuff. And it's something that they acknowledged when they were talking about licensing out their IP. So, honestly, this is what I would do if I'm WB. Number one, I would have already stopped work on Suicide Squad, right? Mrs. Freeze just came out. It looks like they're going to continue with the story that we know happened because it leaked almost immediately when the game first came out, where, I guess, spoiler alert, the Justice League were killed throughout the story, but very quickly, there was, I think, some leaked audio logs, and everybody found out, like, oh, wait, actually, we didn't kill the Justice League. There were clones of the Justice League. So everyone already knew what these 4 seasons were leading up to. They were leading up to probably actually saving the original Justice League. I personally said that was a problem. That was an issue because you're trying to tell a story, but the only way that you can tell the story that you've made is to have people have to wait over a year for you to finish the story that you're setting up, and then you didn't do a good job of hiding it. It just doesn't make any sense now. So to me personally, I would have stopped Suicide Squad development already. Okay, maybe Mrs. Freeze was far along already. Anyone else? I think that the next character, I think one is Floyd Lawton's daughter. I don't remember what her name is. And then I honestly can't remember who the fourth character is that they're trying to release into this game. Because they leaked very, very early on. Cancel those two. Mrs. Freeze is the last character. I'm going to shrink that team. I'm going to give the game a permanent price drop. I'm dropping it from 60. I'm dropping it down to 40. I'm striking deals with Xbox and PlayStation. I'm putting this game on Game Pass. I'm putting the game on PSN immediately, or PS Plus immediately. And then at some point, I'm dropping the price permanently down to $40, maybe even $30. Just salvage what you have on there. Let's be honest. Just to salvage it, right? Then I'm keeping a small team, obviously, to keep the game running, keep the game going, maybe continue to work on some skins here and there, but I'm not adding anything else to the game. You had sold the season pass as part of like a deluxe edition. Do a partial refund if you have to. Kill the game. It's done. Shut it down. There's absolutely nothing you could do to make it work. Admit defeat and move forward. Then I'm taking the bulk of that team and I'm moving them into a Batman game. You got to go back to what worked. It worked before. Yes, you lost the leaders of the company. Sefton Hill left. But let's be honest, Sefton Hill was also the leader of Suicide Squad. And I think he was one of the head writers of the story that didn't work out, right? So I've always praised Sefton Hill for what he did for Arkham's and the other co-founder of Rocksteady. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. They both decided to leave, but there's still a lot of great raw talent at Suicide Squad, left at Rocksteady. Let's be honest, we can judge Suicide Squad for a lot of the things that they've done wrong, but there's a lot of things that they've done right. When you think about the cutscenes, the direction, the character design, the art design of that game is still phenomenal. It's a technical achievement, right? So immediately I'm moving them on to something else. I'm either giving them Superman, which personally I would do. Personally, I would just give them Superman, or I'm giving the Batman Beyond license. I don't think that you should go back to Arkham. Erase Arkham from memory. Never make another Batman Arkham game ever again. You got to let Arkham go. If you're going to make a Batman game, you have to fully refresh it. And in my opinion, Batman Beyond is the way to go. I think it's the perfect way to almost like soft reboot this team and give them something else to sink their teeth into. And obviously, you make it single player. That's it. You guys aren't doing anything live service anymore. You guys just can't do it anymore. It's not going to work. If you want to do live service, in my opinion, I'm looking at Harry Potter. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm looking at Harry Potter. And maybe it's something where it's Hogwarts Legacy, where maybe you try to see if you can work something hybrid in there. You look at the success of what's happening with the Quidditch game that's about to come out. I think that works better for live service. I think you'll be able to find better success on there. And if there's a team that I think can find a way to balance it and make it work, it would be Avalanche, because they did a phenomenal job with Hogwarts Legacy. So that's what I'm doing with that. NetherRealm, I'm immediately making them do another Injustice. And therein lies WB's future. It's in the biggest license that they're not using. It's DC. That's the biggest license that they're not using. Marvel is smart. Marvel has been really smart over the last 5 years in pivoting how they treat their video game properties. Marvel understands we can't do this, or Disney, I guess I should say. We can't do this. We can't build teams and do it ourselves. You know, they tried the whole Disney, what was that Disney, the toy line thing, ironically built by Avalanche Software, right? It's not working. Let's find partners to start licensing out. That's when they went out. They went to Xbox. You guys want Spider-Man? Xbox stupidly said no. Then, of course, they went to PlayStation. Insomniac made Spider-Man. The rest is history. Now we've got Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 3 is being worked on. Wolverine is about to come out soon. It's at the height of Wolverine's character, right? Hugh Jackman just came back in Deadpool and Wolverine, blew it out the water. You have the Black Panther solo game. You have the Iron Man solo game. You have the Captain America and Black Panther. Midnight Suns, yes, it wasn't super great, but it was still a pretty solid game. It's kind of becoming almost like a cult classic in a sense. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection is coming out soon. There are now rumblings of a brand new Marvel vs. Capcom. There is a content creator. I can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but they're creating a mod project for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. They're modding it to bring a little bit more attention to it. It's like a cel shaded look. looks phenomenal. Like there's a lot of things that Marvel is doing. Recently we've seen what they're doing with Fortnite. They just announced, I think it's called Absolute Doom, where they're putting Doctor Doom and Captain America skins, and I think Gwenpool is in there, a bunch of Marvel characters in there. Marvel is just firing on all cylinders when it comes to the intellectual property, and that's not even mentioning Marvel Rivals, which became an instant hit, an instant not classic. I'm going a bit too far there. DC is the way to go. James Gunn is already committed to rebuilding this film universe. He's talked about games being a part of that. This is it. This is the gold mine that WB is sitting on top of, that you have to start opening these conversations and going to these separate studios and saying, hey, would you guys be interested in creating a game within the Batman universe? Maybe it's not Batman. Maybe it's a Nightwing game or someone else. I still think that there should absolutely be a Batman Beyond game. But there are so many other DC properties that you could think of. A Superman game, obviously, is an obvious one. But there's like other ones. Like I was thinking of like Constantine. Imagine, there was a Constantine game that was tied into the movie. And I know that there's supposed to be a new Constantine film coming out at some point, again with Keanu Reeves. But to me, a Constantine video game based on comic book Constantine, not, based on a movie or anything, would do phenomenal, a Constantine video game, as long as you find the right studio to partner with. DC is the gold mine that this company is sitting on, that for some reason they're just not using it. So the fact that they're considering licensing out their IP, you got to go for it. Like it's a bill printing machine. If I walked into a focus group of gamers and I said, hey guys, what do you think about this? And I clicked a slide, and it was a picture of the Justice League and a bunch of DC superheroes, and I clicked again, there was a plus button, and then I clicked one more time, and you saw the picture for Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I said DC Ultimate Alliance. The money printer goes brr, right? Like it's an infinite money glitch. If you take a simple concept as Ultimate Alliance, a game that so many people have been yearning for, another Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Take that formula that works so well. It's going to work perfectly in this generation, and except you do it with DC heroes, with the Justice League. What more do you guys want? It's so obvious what you guys are sitting on, that you have to utilize it. That's the license that WB has to go for. And finally, I want to talk about hardware decline across the industry. So Sony announced PlayStation 5 has surpassed 61 million units sold worldwide. 2.4 million PS5s were sold Q1 of this year compared to 3.3 million PS5s last year. That represents a 27% drop. Games and network services are up, though, 12% year over year. Operating income up 32%. They also announced that the digital download ratio for Q1 was 80% digital versus 20% physical, compared to an average of 70% in fiscal year 2023. Just keep in mind that there are a lot of games now that are either digital first or digital only, so that sort of does skew these numbers just a tiny bit. But yeah, so Sony is now the third, the big three in a row to announce numbers and then bring up hardware decline. So 2 weeks ago, Xbox announced Xbox hardware revenue decreased 42% year over year. Their hardware is down 13% for the entire year. Last week, Nintendo revealed software sales were down 41.3% and hardware declined 46.3%. And the reason why this is happening to me is very, very simple. Price. That's it. Price is definitely the factor. We have not seen a price drop for any of these consoles, and that is not normal in our industry. We're at a moment right now, and I've said it before, where the cost of existing has increased quite a few percentage points over the last 4 years. And, when essential goods increase, the first thing that gets cut are luxuries, right? You can't cut rent, you can't cut electricity bill, you can't cut your internet, right? Those are things that you absolutely positively need. The food bill is not going to get cut. If the food bill doubles, it doesn't matter. You cut from somewhere else because you need food, right? What you don't need are video games. And on top of that, when you think about operating income, you also have to think about the effect of free-to-play games. We have so many free-to-play games right now that I'm sure that kind of cuts into operating income just a bit, right? Because people are not willing to spend. They're waiting longer. They're waiting for more sales. They're being a lot more patient with video games now than they've ever been before. And a lot of it is just, once again, people are struggling. And I decided to look back at the last generation. I was like, how long did it take in the last generation for us to see price cuts? So it took the Nintendo Wii U just 10 months to see a $50 price drop on the deluxe model. So 10 months from its launch date, it was already $50 cheaper. It took PlayStation 4 23 months before it saw a $50 price drop. It took Xbox One 7 months before they released a Connect-free model for $100 less, then another 5 months before it dropped another $50. So Xbox One was $150 cheaper than the launch model just 12 months after release. Now let's compare that to this generation. Nintendo Switch has been $299 since launch. So that's been 7 years. PlayStation 5 Disc Edition has been $499 since launch, which in November will be 4 years. The digital edition went up by $50, so I actually got a price increase. Xbox Series X and S have been $499 and $299 since launch, which in November, once again, will be 4 years. And in several regions, Xbox also saw a price increase. So prices aren't going down. And I wasn't going to go through all historical data of video game consoles, but I'm pretty sure this might be the longest we've gone into a generation where neither of the three consoles got a permanent price cut. I don't consider Nintendo dropping the Switch Lite as a price cut, for example. We've seen promotions. The PlayStation 5, I think it was like a week ago, they were like $50 off. Sometimes since launch, you could find an Xbox Series X for like $100 off. I've seen, Xbox Series S's sometimes for like $110 here and there. But those are temporary, right? Those are sales. Those are not permanent price drops. So it's not really hard to see why hardware is beginning to decline. People are holding on to their old consoles a lot longer. I bought both of these systems at launch. And to me personally, there hasn't been like this you have to buy this console type of game. Like, we haven't really seen that yet. We're going to see that explosion happen next year with Grand Theft Auto 6. If it makes, Take-Two reiterated once again last week that it still is on track for fall 2025. Of course, it can get delayed at any moment. But it's one of those things where Grand Theft Auto 6 is really going to be what I consider the biggest migration of old gen to current gen that we've seen. And what's interesting is that by the time Grand Theft Auto 6 releases in fall 2025, rumors are saying that the next consoles, the next Xbox, the next PlayStation, are actually slated for 2026. So I think that they're, unless you're the 10 people on planet Earth that don't care about Grand Theft Auto, I think that there are a lot of PlayStation 4 owners that would probably tell themselves like, okay, maybe I'll just save up and just wait until PlayStation 6 and just completely skip PlayStation 5. I think in the long run, we're going to look back, a decade, 15 years from now, and this is probably going to be one of the worst generations that we've seen in gaming for kind of quite some time. If we're talking about PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, I'm not going to count the Nintendo Switch as that, just because it sort of fell in that seam, that in between the last generation and the current one, right? Sort of snuck in there. Where I don't think anyone can call Nintendo Switch a failure. It's on track to be the best-selling video game console of all time. But when you really think about the impact of PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, how are we going to look back at this generation? It sort of does feel like a lost generation. This is a writer that I follow on Twitter. His name is Tony Polanco. And I remember he said this like in 2021 or something like that. I was like, wow, this guy actually has a really, really good prediction. This feels like a very lost generation at this point where, I don't know, it just, what I think that we noticed was really representative about this point in time is that we're seeing a lot of paradigm shifts in the way we play games, the way we access games. Obviously this live service explosion happened during this generation, but I think that there aren't really that many like blow the door off the hinges original titles that came out during this generation. It's a lot of sequels. It's a lot of copy and paste that we've been seeing in this generation. Some games sort of, stick out like weeds in the concrete a bit, but there's just kind of been this stagnation for hardware this generation where I don't think, some of the most exciting things we've seen and some of the biggest conversations that we've been having throughout the years has been a lot of indie stuff, smaller stuff. It's been the Among Us's and the Chained Togethers and all that stuff. It's these really simple, easy to pick up kind of video games. And it just shows you that people just yearn for something a little bit simpler than what we've been seeing in our industry lately. I think it's going to be interesting just to see what this next generation sort of looks like. Are we going to see even more apprehension from people because of the disappointment of this generation? I don't remember 4 years in to a lot of these other consoles and feeling this way. I didn't feel this way for PS3, PS4, PS2, PS1. I definitely didn't feel this way for Xbox 360, where it felt like 4 years in, you're just looking at your system, you're like, I just don't feel like there was anything like that really defined this purchase for me. That was like, man, I really like you felt that way when you bought Grand Theft Auto 3 for PlayStation 2, for example. I was like, man, this was why I bought this system. I felt that way with Metal Gear Solid 4 for PlayStation 3, where I was like, oh my God, yes. Or Xbox 360, I felt that several times. Oblivion, Condemned, even very early on. Dead Rising, Gears of War, the Halos, Halo 3 on there. There were just so many games that really defined that console for you. You looked back on it very, very fondly. And when it comes to this generation, I just sort of don't feel that way at all. Maybe I feel it a little bit with Nintendo Switch. I think they had such a great breadth of software throughout those 7 years. But I think it'll be interesting to see what this next generation really looks like for these systems. And I think the decline is really just people wanting a price drop, and it's weird because it's like, when are we going to see it? It hasn't even been 12 months since PlayStation 5 increased the price of their system. There's now rumors of a PlayStation 5 Pro. There were rumors that's supposed to come out this year. I mean, who knows if that's going to happen? I was saying maybe they'll announce it at the Tokyo Game Show, which I think takes place early next year, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, not next year, early next month. And then when that comes out, how much is that going to be? Is that going to be $600? $600 is kind of insane, for a piece of hardware where I just don't think that there's much compelling. I think the PS5 Pro is like the GTA 6 machine. And I'm such a huge Grand Theft Auto fan that it's like, yeah, honestly, I would consider selling my PlayStation 5 and then paying the difference to get a PlayStation 5 Pro. There is a part of me that's a little bit intrigued by that. Depending on the specs and depending on what it can do to Grand Theft Auto 6, yeah, I probably would consider it. And I think it's going to be interesting to find out what happens next year with Nintendo Switch. And this is why I think that, I've been saying this for years on Camp Koji, that the next Switch is just going to be a new Nintendo Switch. I don't think that it would make any sense for Nintendo to just completely abandon those 100 million plus players. I think you're better off treating the new Nintendo Switch like a PlayStation 5 Pro, which is like, yeah, it'll play all games. And I think it should be separate. Like, I think it would be good if there were games that only work on new Nintendo Switch. So that way you bring back those companies that have left you. You bring EA back so you can get the actual FIFA, the actual Madden, the actual college football. You bring back Activision so you can get an actual Call of Duty without telling them, no, you have to make a Switch version. And then, I think it makes sense. But then that Nintendo Switch continues, and then you give it its first price drop. You'll be a $250 console on the market. And imagine if that Nintendo Switch Lite hits $150, and now you have this new Nintendo Switch on the market for $300 or $350, whatever it is that decided to introduce it at. It's just such a winning combination for them. Nintendo's going to be sort of just fine. I'm curious to see, especially with Xbox, how much they're going to struggle when it comes to the next generation, because they did such a poor job of really, not convincing people to buy Xbox. But if you bought an Xbox, it's like, well, how satisfied do you feel by the output that we gave you over these last 4 years, and how much is that going to inform someone's future decision to buy the next Xbox whenever it does release? It's going to be a very, very interesting next generation because of what we're seeing now, just 4 years into this generation. But obviously, once again, everyone just wants price drops. That's what they need. This week's hot releases: August 14th, we have Sam & Max: The Devil's Playhouse, PC, PS4, Switch, Xbox One. August 15th, we have Kenna Bridge of Spirits, Xbox One and Xbox Series X. I Am Your Beast comes to PC, also August 15th. Hunt Showdown 1896, same date, PC, PS5, Xbox Series X. And finally, August 16th, we have EA Sports Madden NFL 25, PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. Time for us to wrap it up. The stories we didn't have time to get to. Now, in an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick says his company still has no plans to release his AAA titles on subscription services on their day of release. And he's right. There's just really no need for them to do this. It just wouldn't financially make any sense. I think there are certain games that make sense. It sort of a little bit reminds me of actually Borderlands, which the film, which we're going to talk about shortly. T-Mobile is running a $5 promotion where you can get a ticket for $5. And it's kind of funny because I predicted that happening on the Camp Koji show when Borderlands trailer first released. I said, oh, maybe I'll see if T-Mobile does a $5 ticket deal. Spoiler alert, I'm still not going to see it. But, they sort of do that when the tracking is really low. And I think part of that reasoning or strategy is like, hey, if we sell these tickets for $5 and people see it, maybe they'll see it, they'll enjoy it, and then they'll tell other people about it, and those people will pay full price for it. That's sort of what that promotion is used for. And I think a lot of companies sometimes use Game Pass in the same vein, where for indie games, I think it's a very good boost when a game first comes out. We saw it a lot with Power World. Fall Guys is another great example of a game that comes out. You're able to get more people to access to it. And once you do that, you can boost every other platform. So like, the playtime on the PC versions of Fall Guys and Power World gets boosted because so many people are able to access it through Game Pass and stream it and talk about it and make YouTubes and tweet about it, that word of mouth now leads to a bit of an explosion of sales. But if you're Take-Two, you're going to have a really big chunk of your audience show up day one. And it doesn't make sense to lose those people to a subscription service when you just really don't need it. There are some times that it makes sense, like a game like Outriders that debuted on Game Pass. That game obviously did not do very well, but I think it would have done much worse if it didn't debut on Game Pass. So yeah, I agree with Strauss Zelnick. It just doesn't make any sense for their games to be on services day one. Borderlands released this weekend, and the film currently sits at a 10% Rotten Tomatoes score and a 51% audience score. It brought in just $8 million on opening weekend. It's currently, and its budget was $115 million. When you factor in marketing, I've seen a few numbers being thrown out. Some people are saying 160, 175 million will be the total cost after marketing. It doesn't look like they put a lot of money into marketing for this movie, so maybe it didn't reach 200 million. But yeah, that would be an over $100 million loss for this film. I don't think anyone's really surprised about this. I was very excited when this was first announced as being made because I thought that it made sense. I thought Borderlands was a perfect game to be able to adapt to a film. And then the moment that I instantly checked out was when they announced the cast. When they announced that cast, I said, forget it. You guys obviously don't know what you're doing. I played all 3 Borderlands. I'm definitely not a fanatic, but I know enough about the game that Cate Blanchett and this other, is it Jamie Lee Curtis, I think is her name, make absolutely no sense. Then these guys brought in Kevin Hart for some reason. It just absolutely none of it made sense. Then Eli Roth was brought in. You know, my excitement for Craig Mazin, who wrote the script, then it was changed so much that Craig Mazin demanded that his name be taken off. He created Chernobyl, I think one of the best TV shows of all time. It's a limited TV series. You guys might know him from The Last of Us. He was the writer and showrunner for The Last of Us HBO show. He's working on season 2 right now. So all that had me excited. And then they announced the cast. I just checked out. When they showed the trailer, I was like, yep, this movie's definitely going to be a bomb. There's just no way that this movie's going to succeed. It's PG-13. It doesn't make any sense. And it's just sort of expected, like we knew this was going to happen, but it's sort of weird because we've worked so hard over the last, I would say like a good 6, 7, 8 years to finally change the perception of video game adaptations. When you think about Sonic, when you think about Detective Pikachu, obviously the Mario film, Fallout, Last of Us, they finally listened to what we've been saying for decades, which is if you want to successfully adapt a video game property, you have to sell the movie to the video game fans first and foremost. That's going to be your core audience. That's going to be your weekend audience. That's going to be your day one audience. That's who you have to cater to. From there, you have marketing stretch it out a bit. That's it. That's the formula. Last of Us did it. Super Mario did it. Fallout did it. Detective Pikachu did it. Sonic the Hedgehog did it when they listened and they redid the character. All of a sudden, something that was destined to be a bomb turned it around. Why? Because they listened to the fans, right? They catered to the fans first. I don't understand how that formula has been out there for this long and you somehow say, no, let's do what they did in the 90s and the 2000s, where we take the property, we just do whatever the hell we want it with it. The games are mature. Let's just make it PG-13. I just don't get it. Let's waste a good chunk of our budget hiring Jack Black to imitate the voice of Claptrap. Doesn't make any sense. like none of this made any sense. And then to make matters worse, over the weekend, Randy Pitchford went on a tirade. This guy was, for those that don't know, he's the head of Gearbox. He started blocking people, apparently like some of the biggest Borderlands creators. He blocked this one dude that admitted he saw the film twice. He's apparently one of Borderlands' biggest content creators. Bunch of YouTube streams it all the time. And Randy Pitchford blocked them because he criticized the film, which he of course, he was still very respectful about it. It's just a bomb all around. There's just not much more to say. I'll definitely watch it when it hits digital. Definitely not gonna pay for it. But there's just no way I'm gonna go into a theater to watch this. Once again, no surprise there. According to Remedy Entertainment, Max Payne 1 and 2 Remake has entered into its full production phase. Yes. Control 2 is now playable and entered the production readiness stage, and Condor is going well, increasing its internal and external playtesting. I love that they put out this update. I sort of wish we would kind of get this a little bit more. I wish it leads to a little bit less secrecy, it leads to less fever. Hey, what happened to this game? Where is it? When are you going to show it to us? When companies are just a bit transparent and telling people, yep, here's the game. This is where it's at. It's going well. I like this. They also confirmed that while Alan Wake 2 has recouped most of its development and marketing costs, it has yet to generate royalties, which is very sad to hear. But remember, this game is still an Epic Games exclusive. Hopefully, we'll see it come to Steam in October. We'll see a nice boost from sales there. Maybe they could do a complete edition, add the Night Springs on there for the same price. So I think they'll see a nice boost in sales when it comes down to it. I'm guessing it's going to be on there in October because Dead Island 2 was an Epic exclusive and it lasted exactly 1 year. So hopefully they have the same deal with Epic, and this game came out last October. So hopefully we'll see it in Steam this October. And finally, footage of Starfield's upcoming vehicle leaked last week. I think this leak apparently originated on 4chan. I don't get it. I think that I just don't understand Bethesda. I still feel like Starfield is such a series of really bad decisions. Like, I'm looking at this footage and it's like, yeah, it's cool. You gave me a car so I could drive around a vast wasteland filled with absolutely nothing. You know, like it just doesn't make any sense. Why are you guys spending resources on something like this? This adds absolutely nothing to the game. I will say it's probably a good thing if you're playing on console where you have no mods, you have no console command. Sorry, if you're playing like on Xbox or PlayStation 5, unlike PC, you don't have access to console command. If you're trying to get to a point of interest on a map, it sucks to have to walk there. I remember on on PC, I had a console command that just like increase my speed by like 400% so I could walk somewhere very, very fast because there's absolutely nothing to do in between these points. So I guess this would be helpful for console players. But outside of that, why wouldn't you guys just make a working jetpack? That's it. That's all you have to do. The jetpacks in these games don't really work. It just bursts. It bursts you forward. Why not just give me a jetpack that when I press a button, I go into the air and I can move forward and I'm just jetting and flying through the air with a jetpack? That's it. That's all you had to do. It's a lot easier to have to go get in and out of a vehicle when you're driving around, once again, an entire planet that has absolutely nothing for you to do. I just don't understand some of the decisions that this company has made. Shout-outs of the week. Shout out to Balatro. The game has sold over 2 million copies and a free update is coming next year. Shout out to Jam City. 10% or around 85 of the members were cut from staff. They are a mobile studio known for licensed titles such as Harry Potter Hogwarts Mystery and DC Heroes and Villains, so hopefully they land on their feet. And finally, shout out to Ready at Dawn, the team behind PSP's Daxter and God of War games, and The Order 1886 was shut down by Meta last week. Once again, hopefully those employees land on their feet, find something soon. Make sure to subscribe to Camp Koji on your favorite podcast platform so you can listen to it on the go. And if you already are, please, please, please leave us a review. It helps much more than you know it. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Please follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Camp Koji for future updates. Once again, I'm Joel, and I will see you all next week.